Her family sold her as useless, until a lonely mountain man built her a cabin and called her wife. The first time Eliza realized her family had given up on her was on a cold autumn evening. She had always been the quiet one, small, thin, with a limp in her step from a childhood illness. Her brothers teased her for being useless, and her parents, burdened by poverty, whispered of her as a mouth to feed with no return. At 17, while her sisters were celebrated as future brides, Eliza was handed over to a wealthy landowner as little more than cheap labor. No one asked her, no one cared. She had been sold, her worth measured only in coins. The landowner kept her in the kitchen, where she worked from dawn to midnight. She scrubbed pots, chopped wood, and slept on the floor by the hearth. For months, she lived with the sting of rejection, her heart aching not for comfort but for the simple dignity of being wanted. Yet even in that misery, Eliza found small acts of resilience. Humming lullabies she remembered from childhood, slipping crumbs of bread to birds outside the window, dreaming of a life where she might matter. One winter morning, fate shifted. The landowner hosted travelers passing through the valley. Among them was a rugged mountain man named Jacob. He was tall, with sun-weathered skin, a quiet gaze, and the look of someone who had spent more time with trees and rivers than with people. He noticed Eliza, not as a servant, but as a person, pausing when she placed food on the table, thanking her with sincerity, his voice low and gentle. It startled her, no one had thanked her in years. The next day, as Jacob prepared to leave, he overheard the landowner boasting about buying Eliza cheaply, calling her broken stock. Jacob's jaw tightened. He had lived alone in a cabin high in the mountains, not because he disliked people, but because he had never found anyone who stayed. Loneliness was his only companion, and here was a young woman, discarded like she had no value. Something in his chest stirred, a mix of anger and compassion. That evening, he returned with an offer. "Let her come with me," he told the landowner. "She deserves more than this." The landowner laughed but agreed, happy to rid himself of dead weight. Eliza was too stunned to resist when Jacob looked at her and said simply, "If you'll come, I'll build you a home." For the first time in her life, someone had spoken as if she had a choice. Trembling, she whispered, "Yes." The journey to Jacob's mountain cabin was harsh, snow crunching beneath their boots, winds biting through thin coats. Yet for Eliza, each step felt like a march toward freedom. When they reached his cabin, a small, sturdy structure tucked against towering pines, Jacob set about making it warmer, stronger, and safer. He cut timber, patched holes, and even carved a second chair, telling her, no one should live without a place to sit. Eliza, who had been treated as less than human, found herself bewildered by such simple kindness. Days turned into weeks. Jacob taught her how to build a fire, how to track deer prints in the snow, and how to gather herbs for tea. In return, she cooked meals, stitched clothes, and sang softly in the evenings. Slowly, her laugh returned, quiet at first, then bubbling like a hidden spring. Jacob never treated her as a servant or a burden. One evening, as the firelight flickered, he said, "Eliza, you're not useless. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. You survived what would have broken most." Tears filled her eyes. No one had ever spoken of her worth before. The turning point came in spring. A storm swept through the valley, flooding the river. Jacob slipped while trying to secure the cabin roof, injuring his leg. For days, he couldn't walk. Eliza, once called useless, took charge. She chopped wood with blistered hands, hauled water, and nursed him back to health. With every act, she proved not only to him but also to herself that she was capable, worthy of love, worthy of life. When Jacob could finally stand again, he looked at her with eyes full of quiet awe. "You've built more than a cabin here, Eliza," he said. "You've built a home. And if you'll let me, I'd be honored to call you my wife." For a long moment, she could only weep, her heart swollen with disbelief and gratitude. She, who had been discarded, now stood cherished in the eyes of a man who saw her soul. Smiling through her tears, she whispered, "Yes, Jacob. Yes." From that day forward, Eliza's name was no longer spoken with pity or scorn. She was Jacob's partner, his equal, his wife. Together, they built a life not of riches or grandeur, but of dignity, warmth, and love. And in the quiet hush of the mountains, Eliza finally understood. It was never she who was useless, it was the blindness of those who failed to see her light. Her story became a quiet testament to a truth the world too often forgets: when someone is given compassion and belief, they can rise beyond the harshest judgments. In Jacob's kindness, Eliza found her worth. And in Eliza's strength, Jacob found his family.